This was a really wonderful presentation. I really identified with the topic of the car. As an engineer myself, I think we all know that what we want to do is do the good for the public. So it's now actually my distinct honor to introduce our next speaker for the Fireside Chat on AI safety in financial services. Standing here on the stage with me is Mr. Harold Schneider, who is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Equifax. He does a lot at Equifax. He's responsible for global data innovation. He leads the analytics capability, and he uses data to pretty much drive new products and growth. This is not his first rodeo. He has been the former Chief Commercial Officer and Chief Analytics Officer at Tandem Bank, where he led the development of many of that bank's product suite and their risk management and data management and marketing and analytics strategy. There's a lot here, so let's give a good round of applause for Mr. Schneider on his great talk coming up.
Thank you. Okay, the mic is working. So thank you. First of all, I wanted to say thank you very much to Shri and the H2O team for hosting this event. It's great to have a GenAI World here in DC and bring the community together. So what I wanted to do here in the next 25, 30 minutes is just give you guys a little bit of a view, sort of from my vantage point, leading data analytics around how do we think about AI and GenAI specifically from two vantage points, from a business perspective and also from a safety and responsibility perspective. And obviously we only have limited time, so I'll be relatively high level, but leave some time for questions and answer. Before we get started, just very briefly, Equifax, we are a global, we are a Fortune 500 company, data analytics company. Most of you probably know us as a credit bureau, which is part of our businesses, but we're doing more than that. Particularly noteworthy is we are also very actively working with folks in the government space around things like verification for government programs, Medicare, Medicaid, so very active in that space. Talking at a high level, how do we think about AI? We're a data analytics company. We have been using what we call AI today for decades. We have also been using it in a highly regulated environment. So Agus has mentioned SR 11.7 multiple times. I agree with him. It's a very important document. And I always make sure I have it on my desk wherever I am. So we're not new to AI. However, we do recognize that generative AI is new. And so the way we think about it is really, how do we take all the great disciplines, the things that we've been applying already in the predictive space and the broader analytical space, and how do we expand that to also bring the same disciplines and best practices to generative AI? So it's not about reinventing, but rather it's taken the things we already know very well and expanding them. More broadly, sort of from a strategy perspective, again, I think about business as systems, right? And so we want to leverage AI where we can. But again, we think about the business as a system and trying to really understand where are the points of leverage. And so our strategic approach when we talk to our board about this is really focused on three areas. The operational improvements, all the ways where we can use these new capabilities in particular to make things better, faster, more accurate. Internal development, we are a software company, a technology company, and so we do have a lot of team members that are writing code, that are running systems. And again, where are the places there where we can leverage these new capabilities to operate better. And then ultimately, strategically, the place where we think, again, being a data analytics and technology company, this will create most value is in the innovation, our products and services. And so that is, I think, strategically where the biggest value is. So talking a little bit more specifically then about GenAI, what are we actually doing? Well, we're really trying to learn. So there are a lot of places where we're starting to leverage AI, but it is really from an experimental perspective, given all the things that Agus called out. This is new technology. We don't have long-term experience with it the same way we have with predictive AI, where we have 20, 30 years of learnings and best practices. And so we are really trying to experiment rapidly, but in a very, very controlled way. Ideally, we start with the areas that are internal, small risk, and really build the capabilities there. How do we get really, really good at prompt engineering? And again, how do we get the same level of experience, the same best practices, the standards that we have for things like feature engineering, where we have like homemade tools that automatically have guardrails. We're not there yet. We need to build that. But so a couple of examples in the operations space is documentation. Nobody likes documenting, but it's very important. And so there are lots of places where we have experiments underway to create documentation automatically, synthesize documentation, digitized documents. And a company like ours that works with millions of pieces of paper, that is certainly a very important use case. We're a data company. We collect every month data from literally millions of companies. And so for us, really understanding how can we use this in the space of data processing, solutions like Genie Label in the space of data quality is really interesting. From a modeling perspective, we have been, again, we run thousands of models in production. We have been using different predictive techniques for many, many years. We're not really using LLM models yet in any of our core models. We just haven't found the right use case there. But going to Agus's point of let's look at the underlying technology and the methods. We're really always trying to find ways to expand our methods and again, build better solutions and ultimately get to our final goal, which is to improve customers' financial lives and drive more inclusion in financial services. So a couple of interesting things that we've done recently there are we've done some work with Bayesian inference, which goes in the direction of generative AI, and we've for the first time found methodologies that we've also presented at various conferences to use Bayesian inference in credit risk models. And so especially as we're trying to bring more different data sources together to make predictions, we see some interesting applicability there. We're also starting to use, again, the underlying technology or approaches of transformers in these approaches. And, we're looking at things like how can we get more insights from missing data, which sounds maybe a little odd, but again, when you have a situation where in many markets around the globe where we operate, a lot of consumers don't have access to financial services, understanding patterns and missing data could actually be quite interesting. So we don't quite know yet where that goes, but again, we're working on a couple of really interesting papers there. And then look, ultimately, strategically, we think there's opportunities in the product space. And so, fraud naturally is a place where we've used our most sophisticated techniques and also where we're also working with unsupervised techniques. So we think there's more value for us to help our customers make better decisions and drive better outcomes for consumers. And then, we think ultimately, not surprisingly, there will also be ways where we can use those technologies and things like chatbots and customer interactions. Those are high-risk use cases, right? And so we're experimenting in the background, but in very small ways. That is not something that we would be willing to put into production. So again, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a sense of the kind of things we're doing and our approach to it. So we see a lot of potential in AI, and driving innovation through AI is one of our strategic initiatives that you would have heard our CEO talk about in our earnings call. But we also want to really do this in a responsible way. And so what I'm showing you here is our framework for responsible AI. It's not public yet, so you guys are the first, I think, external audience to see it. This is a framework that we've developed over the last year. We've developed it, obviously, looking at things like the NIST AI framework, the White House executive order, the EU AI Act, pending regulation in Australia, lots and lots of academic literature. And so while it may look very simple, as it is here on the page, there's been a lot of very thoughtful work that's gone into this over the last 12 months. And so I just wanted to share that because, again, like as it comes to the techniques and the processes around some of these principles, they obviously vary depending on what model you use. Are we talking about predictive AI? Are we talking about generative AI? But our thinking is really centered around these 8 principles. So, and they're, again, you would see that they align with SRA 11.7 and lots of other frameworks that we have a regulatory obligation to comply with. So, monitoring. Agus talked about the need to have a good navigation system and brakes. Obviously, we need to have very robust monitoring as we put systems in place. And, as we think about generative AI, we need to really think through what is an effective and efficient way to monitor hallucinations, not something that we've done over the last 10 years with our predictive models. Accountability, it's very important as we go through the development and the daily running of the models that everybody is clear on what is their role, what's their accountability, who's responsible for the monitoring of a model from a statistical perspective, from an operational perspective. Fairness and ensuring that there are no biases in models are obviously incredibly important, and also at times a little bit of a tricky problem to solve, but it's something that is part and parcel of our development process and ongoing maintenance of models. We are very strong believers in the need for models to be explainable. In certain of our use cases, that's a regulatory requirement for our customers. But even beyond that, we truly believe that explainability is important to ensure that the models are doing what they're supposed to do. Security is critical too. Given our history, we're obviously very, very focused on security. And so that also applies to the model space. It's really ingrained in how we think about AI and why we, quite frankly, are probably more reluctant to use certain tools than other folks because we just, we don't feel that they are meeting our security requirements. Trust and transparency. We operate in businesses that are very important to consumers' financial lives, and that in certain cases are also regulated. And so it's very, very important that what we do with high quality, and customers, consumers, regulators can trust in what we're doing. As I said before, our mission as a company is to help consumers to live or help people to live their financial best. And so one of the big areas that we're always looking at from an AI strategy, but also from a data strategy and the way we operate every day is how can we drive more financial inclusion? How can we find more data, high quality proprietary data that allows us to make better decisions and our customers to make better decisions for the benefit of consumers. but then also thinking about, again, modeling techniques that will allow us to get better insights, again, with the ultimate goal of driving more inclusion and giving more consumers access to different products. And then last but not least, competence. Again, Agus mentioned it before. I think we need to make sure that the people that run these systems are properly trained. And again, going back to the point of prompt engineering, we have to think through things like, as this becomes a new discipline for our data science teams, how do we actually ensure that data scientists are properly educated and certified to do these type of activities? So again, high-level principles, but hopefully this gives you a sense of how we think about a responsible approach to AI and how some of these principles apply irrespective of the actual techniques. So again, at a high level, as we're expanding into the world of Gen AI, how do we adjust our operating model and our governance to work? So as I said before, we're not thinking of this being new. We already have well-established MIM programs. We have very robust data governance, IT security programs, new product development initiatives. And so what we're doing is really taking those and now adjusting them and fine-tuning them to actually work for new use cases like Gen AI. Training is important. I mentioned competence is one of our 8 principles. And so we are working and ensuring that as we make new tools and capabilities available, we have a structured, thoughtful enterprise AI approach to making sure that people are properly trained. The other aspect that's also a really important control for us is access to AI tools. As I said before, we are very selective on what tools we bring into our ecosystem. We're selective what tools we use to actually, where we use actual data, right? Like our first step when we bring a new tool into a separate environment is usually not to use real data. We use dummy data. So again, we probably use fewer tools than most other organizations, but for us, it's a very important way to make sure that, again, if you look at the principles before, we manage those principles. We manage according to those principles. We're looking at use cases, and so we have pre-approved use cases that are codified where we're comfortable to start using techniques. For other use cases, they go through a review process. And then at the center of everything is our AI governance steering committee. So it's a group of senior executives, cross-functional across legal, compliance, data science, business, that looks at all of these aspects and on an ongoing basis as the techniques, the technologies, the tools evolving also shapes the strategy then. The last thing I just wanted to do before I open it up to questions is I just wanted to give you a little bit of an example of the type of work we're doing. As I said before, we feel very strongly that explainability is a core tenet of responsible to AI. And we're putting our money where our mouth is. And so for the pretty much last 10 years, we have been very heavily investing in actually developing our own algorithms. So, we believe that in order for a model to be explainable, especially in the context of credit risk, it has to be monotonic. And it has to be monotonic across the spectrum, right? And so obviously with a lot of machine learning algorithms out of the box, that's not true. So what we've done over the last 10 years is we've been developing many different algorithms that meet the monotonicity requirement. And so, just to give you a sense of what that portfolio looks like, we have 93 patents around explainable AI. We have another 130 pending. So whether you talk about neural networks, gradient boosted approaches, graph approaches, we've internally developed our own constrained algorithms that meet our explainability requirements. We've built tools around those. So again, I just wanted to share that with you as one facet of what we are doing to, again, truly meet our principles, and how we bring some of these principles to life by actually doing our own research and our own development. So those were the slides that I had prepared for you. Again, sort of just a little bit of a high-level overview around our approach, our philosophy, both around the governance as well as the strategy in the AI and generative AI space. And I would now like, in the last 10 minutes, to just open it up and see what questions you have.
Thank you very much for that. I do have a couple of questions which I'll read out to you. Actually, this is a really good one because I thoroughly enjoyed your talk, and I kind of enjoyed the methodical approach that you're using to generative AI here. The question that comes from the audience is, can you give some examples of a type of operational controls that are needed to operationalize Gen AI?
So I don't think we have a really strong framework there yet, and that's why we're not really rolling anything out in scale. I think the operational controls ultimately are similar to what we do when we develop traditional predictive models. So very strong controls around the data that you're using. And again, as you're going out of the traditional space of where we've applied models to the new space, you find that a lot of the work you have to do is around data. Our core data around, for example, credit bureau is obviously already very well governed, and we have very rigorous quality processes. Well, if you now start using call scripts and call recordings to train your model, or you use other data, you have to really ensure that the same level of rigor, quality around that data, the review around whether that data is suitable, is there any potential skew or bias in that data that could create issues. All those things you now have to apply to those new data sources as well. The questions around the methodology, the robustness of the approach, again, we need to make sure that we now equally apply that to generative AI. Monitoring is incredibly important. I think one of the best things that I heard at one of the Gen AI conferences that I attended last year in Silicon Valley was too many people think about day one. When they think about Gen AI, it's really, you have to think about day two, right? So what are the ongoing controls that you have in place? I think, we need to evolve our monitoring frameworks. We have some experiences around how to monitor for hallucinations, but how do you do that in a scalable and efficient way? Because you don't want to create a system where somebody has to daily have eyes on glass and make sure that there aren't any hallucinations. So again, I think that is part of the muscles and the processes that we're building right now is really to find a structured, as much as possible automated and robust way to do the things that we already have been doing for predictive AI for more than a decade, to do that now with the same level of quality and efficiency also for generative AI.
Great question. I especially like the highlighting about the process and thinking of the day one and the day two. This one actually comes a little bit more perhaps in the meat and nitty-gritty and details. How does your team work together to resolve explainability conflicts with existing models?
So again, like the way we generally do this is that we have pre-built algorithms that meet our explainability requirements. And so we don't generally allow anything to get beyond an experimental stage that isn't using our pre-developed algorithms. If you have a desire to use new techniques and we haven't built solutions for it yet, then we have a central team, a central lab that will assist you in making sure that we develop that new methodology. It doesn't happen very often, to be frank, because we've already done so much. But once in a while, it happens. We had 2 instances last year, and again, that's where we sort of have our smartest brains in our central AI lab, work with the folks out in the businesses and really make sure that we build something that meets our requirements. We obviously have, again, a very rigorous model risk management process. So there's always a second line review. And so even if the first line wouldn't be doing the right thing, we always have the review by the second line. It's a combination of data science experts, model risk officers, legal compliance to make sure that we meet the explainability requirements.
So I think we have time for just one more question. Thank you to the audience. You guys are bombarding. There's a lot of great questions here, Harold. I think we definitely need to kind of follow up after your talk here. But,
absolutely.
But this last one we're going to talk about is, can you give us a sense of the use case creation process in Equifax? What is the turnaround process from idea generation to approval, to development, to deployment? What's that look like?
So today, the way it works is that we're trying to an extent democratize access, and so we think at the end of the day we can't drive the strategy top down. I mean, we're trying to put some structure on and control it, but we also want to get the ideas down from the business. And so typically what we do is we have the use cases submitted centrally, and we have folks that review them. We try to do that very quickly because obviously we don't want someone to spend a lot of time on that. And then, again, we have our pre-approved use cases or areas of use cases. So if you meet those requirements, then you can go forward and move forward. And we also have SMEs that have done similar things that can help point you to tools and existing learnings. If not, then, we usually take it to our governance committee. And so we're trying to keep that process relatively short, ideally less than 6 weeks, I would say. In terms of putting things into production, we have automated processes that for our existing predictive AI, so like we can put things in production very, very quickly. For GenAI, we haven't built our pipelines yet to that extent, right? And so that would be taken longer. But that's also partially a control mechanism because at this point in time, we do actually want to review what gets put into a production environment with a very fine lens.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Schneider. Let's give him a great round of applause. Fascinating talk, and thank you so much. Okay. So we're going to actually, we're a little bit behind time, so I was tapped on the shoulder to say that we're going to probably skip the fireside chat with Sri and Harold, and we're going to go right into the AI risk management discussion. And we're going to call back up Dr. Agus Sudianto, who is kind of sitting over here. Why don't you come on up? And we're going to get another chair, and we're going to ask for the speakers, Mr. Keith Sunderling, who will be coming up and joining us, and Ms. Reva Schwartz. They'll be talking a little bit about AI management, AI risk management. So let's just do a quick introduction. Mr. Keith Sunderling is the commissioner of the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. He was appointed by President Donald Trump and later President Biden, Joe Biden. He is the former vice chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, author of multiple articles on the benefits and the potential harms of using artificial intelligence-based technology in the workplace. So come on up. Okay, you got your microphone. Excellent. Good, good. Let's give him a round of applause. Come on, everybody. This is an intimate affair, everybody, an intimate affair. So let's make it feel like a family affair here. So next I'm going to call up Ms. Reva Schwartz. She is a research scientist, principal investigator of AI bias at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. She is the principal investigator for AI bias within trustworthy and responsible AI programs. She's advised federal agencies about how experts to interact with automation in high-stakes environments, author of multiple articles regarding bias in AI, which is a very important topic here, risk management frameworks, and how to create trustworthy AI. So let's give a round of applause for Ms. Schwartz. Thank you, welcome. And last but not least, Dr. Sudianto, come on back up.
All right.
Pleasure. Round of applause. Thank you, everybody.
Can I use the microphone?
Oh, sure. Yes, you may.
So I'm going to use the opportunity now asking a lot of questions. So we're going to have a very, very fun conversation, and not too often, not too common to have a fun conversation with our regulators. Okay, so especially with EEOC. So this one will be a special treat. Okay, and Reva too, because Reva has been working on the AI risk management framework, and actually we knew each other because of that, right? And I'll give a little bit background, One day I got an email from EEOC. That's the scariest thing that
you called your lawyers right away. They said, "Don't talk to him."
So I called my lawyer right away, right? So, but since then we have been a good friend and learned from each other.
Yes, and thanks to Patrick Hall for introducing us and introducing me to the IA risk management world.
Yes. So this is really, really amazing. We have people, we have experts, we have people that really care on the in this area. So it's very, very special privilege. So let me start with this. I'm going to start with Reva first. The audience may not be familiar with NIST on AI risk management framework. Why NIST working on this? What's the purpose and things like that. Why don't we start with that, Reva?
Yeah, excellent. So first, I should always correct the record that NIST is not, in fact, a regulatory agency.
Yes,
Although Keith will take that mantle for this panel. NIST is a federal agency under the Department of Commerce, and we are focused on measurement, to be honest. Standards is our middle name, but we focus on measurement. We focused on the AI risk management framework, quite frankly, because Congress mandated us to do so. So back in 2021, we were tasked with building the AI RMF, and we spent 18 months doing it in collaboration with 240 organizations from private industry, from civil society, from federal, state, and local, and international government organizations. So, yep.
Yeah. I spoke about before about SR 11.7 that is must read. NIST AI risk management framework is another one that must read for everybody. It has a lot of wealth of information and expectation. If you can give a little bit very high level, Reva, what's the key point in the AI risk management framework from NIST?
The bumper sticker is we joke, ask us about our risk-aware culture. We are trying, the framework is not meant to be a checklist. We're trying to change the culture within organizations to think more critically about risk, about impacts, both negative and positive, and how to build trustworthy AI. We learned so much from you during the development of the framework and from SR 11.7, quite frankly, about how to build up a risk-aware culture within the organization.
Keith, from your side here, EEOC, an agency that focuses on civil rights. Why you in particular?
Why am I here?
Yeah, in particular EEOC, and in particular you, very, very into this one.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you, as always, for all the information you've given for me, and you've been a great teacher to me in this world as well. So for those of you who don't know, the EEOC is the federal law enforcement agency that deals with all workplace rights, prevents discrimination in the workplace. So you think about the bigger issues that we have to deal with, the Me Too movement, diversity, equity, inclusion, pay equity, everything related to COVID and the vaccines and workplace accommodations. So we have a lot on our plate to begin with. In the US, you can't sue your employer directly without coming to our agency. So we see every case of employment discrimination, whether you're in the private sector or the federal government. So that's what I like to say my day job is. But when I got to the EEOC, I really started looking at what the issues are moving forward. What is going to be impacting the workforce more than anything else? And that's where I started learning about the proliferation of AI being used in employment through the entire employee life cycle. AI, large companies, small companies, all the different size companies are using AI and machine learning to make all types of employment decisions that once were made by humans. And the reason that AI is really catching fire within the human resources community, within corporations, looking to integrate AI, is the promise that AI can eliminate the human from human resources. Because if you look at where the issues have been in human resources, the reason my agency exists, that's human bias, right? So if we could just eliminate the human and have an algorithm make all those determinations about who should get hired, who should get fired, who should get promoted, what somebody should pay, then there'll be no reason for the EEOC to exist anymore. So that's how a lot of these programs are being designed, developed, and deployed. And obviously, as you all know, it is not that simple. And in all seriousness, the reason why we've made this such a priority at the EEOC, and I speak everywhere I can about it, is two reasons. One is, unlike other uses of AI, like in your world, to make financial models, to make things more efficient, faster, make deliveries faster, make widgets faster, when you're using AI in employment, you're dealing with some of the most fundamental civil rights we have in this country, which is the ability to enter and thrive in the workforce, provide for your family without being discriminated against. So I don't want to say like what Europe and other people are designating it as a higher risk category of AI. I don't say that. I just said it's a category of AI that deals with civil rights. So there's a lot more care and caution that needs to go with it. As well, because there are a lot of significant benefits to this as well that can actually make a lot of decisions in employment which haven't been unfair, which is why we collect, the last 2 years, $1 billion from employers for violating these laws that can help us get there in a much more transparent way.
Thank you very much. And I think this is very timely too. I'm not going to ask Keith, but it's in the news that the Workday has a class action lawsuit on these things and have a lot of impact, but it's something that very, very important on this. But the next question that I have, probably start with Riva, and both of you. You very, very visible in public, and you talk to a lot of people about AI and risk of AI, publish a lot of article you wrote in Harvard Business Review and all of those things. So share with the audience your conversation, what you're talking about with all the people, be it from the government agency as well as the private sector, when in your conversation about this. So start with you, Riva.
Yeah, so not only do we talk to them, but we actually hear from them because we just, I spent a couple weekends ago going through all of the RFI comments for the EO. So we hear from them all the time, and we talk to private industry a lot. I think everybody's concern is to make sure that AI systems are safe before they're deployed. You've talked about that. How do we make sure that they're not causing accidents once technology is out there? We have a measurement approach on that. We look at everything through a measurement lens, and there's a measurement science now for how AI performs, like what it does. But what we don't have is a measurement science for trustworthy AI or for risk. And so they are looking to us to help establish those techniques and approaches and tools and guidelines to help them do that.
Very good. And I am a big fan of what NIST put together, because we have been living with SR 11.7 in the financial institution. So having NIST to put this, have a outreach to all the industry. So I think thank you so much for that, Riva. Keith, how about you, Keith?
From my perspective, because like I said earlier, we regulate a use of AI that is easy to understand, that impacts every single person in every single industry and everyone in this room who's going to have a job, be in the workforce. At some point there's going to be either management by an algorithm or the algorithm is going to make that determination. So like I said earlier, because you're dealing with civil rights here, I'm able to stand back in our area and cut through some of the noise. And there's a lot of noise in Washington, D.C., especially since ChatGPT came out. Yes, we were joking before that, the people who were involved in this before generative AI and ChatGPT were dying to talk to anyone about this, and now everyone wants to talk to us as much as we can. And I think that's created a lot of confusion about now, because there's a new technology that everyone can play with, we need new laws. We need a new agency to enforce this. The existing structure just doesn't work, and that's a lot what you're hearing from Congress. And I've been trying to bring it back and say, look, in employment, what are you asking the tool to do? And there's only a finite amount of employment decisions, right? You can either be hired, demoted, fired, right? There's a list of them, right? And AI has not created a new employment decision yet in that sense. So what are you asking it to do? Are you asking it to make the decision? Or are you asking it to give you more information to make the decision? But there's ultimately going to be an employment decision. And that's what we regulate, and that's what we've regulated since the 1960s to see if there's bias in that employment decision. So that's where we have to continue to stay focused, and that we have a lot of very strong laws that we enforce, both administratively and in court, and we know how to see if there's bias in those decisions long before we actually had models and algorithms to putting in more data points in there. So we can't lose sight, especially as a law enforcement agency, to ensure that everyone knows that there are existing laws, that we are enforcing those laws, whether a human made that decision or a robot made that decision. And that is difficult for people who don't want to understand that and say, well, this is all new, it's the wild, wild west right now. It's not true. So I've really just been trying to get everyone home. What are you asking to do? How are you getting there? And then what is the result? Because we at the EEOC, we regulate employment law. We cannot and do not have the resources to regulate technology. And if we start trying to get in the game of saying, well, let's regulate the tech, let's regulate the algorithm, we're going to lose because that's not our skill set. But we're going to win when we're saying, here's the result, and was it lawful or not? And that's what we've been doing. And that's what the message I've been trying to get home. Stop getting so confused and distracted about some of the technology. There's going to be a result, whether it's in your world in finance or housing or employment. Look at the result.
Yeah. Very, very, very excellent. Thank you thank you very much for that one. Reva, back to you about AI risk management framework. How should government agency or industry adopt it in practice? I'm trying to give a little background. In SR 11.7, we have things, then it took us several years to be where we are today. But what is the thinking and the approach that NIST thinking about it?
Yeah, so the framework has 4 main categories, and they're all trying to focus on, or trying to help organizations get better at mapping risk, understanding risk, contextualizing it, measuring it, governing it, and managing it. So it's all about the risk, but we can't think about risk without thinking about the kinds of impacts that can happen. And we can't do that from just a AI-based perspective. We talk a lot about the fact that these systems are socio-technical. They are complex, highly complex systems that have that are based on data from people that are used by people in various settings, and that requires a different and sometimes different structures within your organization, but certainly teams who understand and who are able to map those risks. So we have something we call the map function, and that is something that I think we kind of knew ahead of time that people were going to struggle with that because they don't necessarily have the expertise in tech organizations. Of course, not. A colleague of ours likes to say every org is a tech org nowadays. So building up that capacity internally to make sure that you have those experts. But the real answer probably to this question is governance. Governance, nothing can happen without it. So we say, the framework is voluntary, but we say if you're going to do anything in the framework, you have to do the governance function integrate as many of these outcomes as you can. The framework works on, provides organizations with outcomes they should meet, and we have a playbook to help people build up their capacity to meet those outcomes.
Very good. Keith, I'm going to turn this question a little bit on your side because you're the enforcer, Keith. And we have the framework, we have expectation, but it's not law, right? I'm wondering from the EEOC point of view, with all these things that you talk about, is there any specific step or things that you do to the industry so they will pay attention? And I'm coming after you, okay? Those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, we have almost 100,000 cases every year, 200 litigations, about 400 lawyers, 2,000 investigators who are working to make sure that all use of technology is proper in employment decisions. But in all seriousness, related to what we can say from our perspective of how to lawfully use these products. Because it's no longer a question, are you going to use AI in HR? It's how are you going to use it and what purpose and how are you going to comply with the long-standing civil rights laws, which is the question. So within that, there's a lot of long-standing frameworks that employers who want to use this technology can use. And, you know, I've been advocating within our space, too, to build these governance structures around whether it's the NIST framework, whether it's SR 11.7. There's just so many corporate governance policies out there already that companies are already doing in other aspects of their business that they need to integrate when using AI. And, you know, it's doing that just puts you in so much better of a position than those who are not going to be doing that. Because a lot of the software, especially in my space, is being sold as regular SaaS software. You know, integrate it. It's going to make employment decisions faster, more efficient, more economical. Have a set it and forget it approach like you do other types of CRM software, right?
Yes, yeah.
And that's just not the case here in employment. And so much has to be done on the front end. And if you just take a step back, you know, all of you, when you started working at your corporations, right, you've had to do EEO training, sexual harassment training. You had to sign all those, you know, thick employment handbooks that you probably didn't read and just signed to start your first day. And, you know, the reason companies have those is to set the culture of ensuring that employees are going to be free of harassment and free of discrimination. And you're signing on to that culture. And if the employer violates that culture, you know, by harassing you or discriminating against you, you have recourse as an employee to go to HR. And similarly, if you, as an employee, sexually harass another one of your coworkers, you know you are going to be fired about that, and you have training about that. And I've been arguing the same thing now needs to happen with AI. It's what are your macro principles related to AI? And there's a lot of them out there with a lot of big tech companies that put out policies about their own fair use of the global use of AI. Mm-hmm. And then micro policies like in employment, that only people who are going to have access to these tools, which give you more data on people's race, gender, religion, ethnicity, whether directly or the machines can pull it out, are going to be trained by the vendor, are going to sign on to the fair use of the policies. And if they use these tools unlawfully, let's say they'll just select men over women or younger workers over older workers, they're going to be fired just as they would be fired if they sexually harass someone. But you need those policies and procedures in place to at least eliminate some of the intentional misuse of AI, which we all know can happen because there's humans operating these machines. Now, that's a little different than the data set kind of discrimination, but just on the front end, it's a lot of these basic principles that corporations already have within HR and with other areas, especially in the banking industry through SR 11.7 or otherwise, that you're already doing it, and we just need to start integrating that for every specific use of AI. But like everything else, that costs us more money, it costs more tools. So, you know, budgets are already tight, and you're saying, well, let's buy this AI to make decisions cheaper, more economical. And now we're saying, well, now we need to build this whole governance structure around there, spend more money about it. And that's the fight, but that's where the rubber is going to meet the road for ethical and lawful use of these tools across industry.
Yeah.
I mean, without governance, all of that money that's spent will just go to, eventually go to waste. So the governance process and the structure and the policies and procedures provide a mechanism to stop the companies kind of lurching from one product release to another. It provides the guardrails within the organization, not necessarily about your AI, so that they know that when they're bringing on this technology, now they know how to actually implement it.
And it's the scalability too. In my area, if one person has bias and doesn't want to hire somebody because of a religion, a race, a gender, right? Before, they have to go through each resume and say, well, is this person male or female? What indicators are there? Do they go to women's college? Do they go to historically black college? It takes time to discriminate, right? And now, with AI in 0.7 seconds, you could discriminate against millions of applicants at the scale we've never seen before. So that's where having these guardrails in place, if something like that happens, at least cuts it off quickly and sends triggers. But that's all having these governance structures in place. And there's just so many examples, again, for companies to essentially copy and paste that within the AI structure.
Before I ask the next question, I think this is I want to put a bit advertisement on this, because speaking about the governance, this is where the financial institution have practiced MRM, have done governance, how to put this in real practice, right? So for some of you that's not in banking, probably some at least a few lessons learned that you can learn. Get your friends from the banking industry to learn how they establish the governance and run governance. But I'm going to ask the next question related to what you talk about, particularly shifted to GenAI. GenAI and a lot of this tool as well are done by provider. And in particularly in GenAI world, because this is a big model that a lot of most company, particularly the smaller company, will not have ability or knowledge behind this GenAI construction and what potential risk and how to prevent it. Unlike Big Bang, where we have all of this capability. So how do you? What's your thought on this? Where's the responsibility? How can we make the big vendor hyperscaler to be more responsible, or is it going to be okay? The accountability are really more on the user. So. And
I'll
start with that.
I'll start off with the scary stuff. And here's the issue to what you said. For us, the vendors in our space do not have liability. Only under the law, three groups can make an employment decision. The employer, a union, or a staffing agency. That's where our jurisdiction is limited to. That's what the law says, who can make an employment decision. So to us, there is no defense that's saying we bought this program that promised diversity, equity, inclusion, that promised to use AI and machine learning to get us the best candidates, the most diverse candidates, and it only gave us this one slate. Go after the vendor EEOC, go ask them how it did it. It doesn't matter to us. We're only going to look at the company that used the product, and that's it. So knowing that, it adds, that required extra level of care to ensure when you're working with the vendor, when you're questioning the vendor, of how are they going to, ensure that the data is not going to be discriminatory, that individual users, whether it's them or your own employees, can't use this tool improperly to discriminate. So there's a whole nother layer of risk management that needs to happen between the sale of the product to the company, and then the deployment side. We've been talking about more of the deployment side, but that front end side needs to happen as well when you're using it in HR, and that's really tricky because, as an example, as you were saying, there's kind of an infamous story at this point. Nobody knows if it's true anymore, just a legendary story, but it's illustrative of the problem here. One company went to an AI vendor to go find the best candidates, and they told the AI vendor, who promised to get the most diverse, skilled, talented employees, here's our current top performers. Go use the fancy machine learning and find what skills makes them so great, and go find a lot more of them, right? So we can make more money off this. It sounds reasonable, it sounds fair. So the machine learning looked at the candidates, the top performers, and they said, okay, well, the most likely indicators of success at your company is being named Jared and having played high school lacrosse, right? And that was a program that was designed to diversify the workforce. And in that sense, whether the algorithm wasn't sophisticated enough to say, well, there must be some other indicator of what the actual skill was other than being named Jared and going to a prep school in high school versus what these are the actual skills we're looking for, which cuts across race and gender. But in that situation, that's what the computer, that's what the machine came back with. And if that's your candidate pool, that employer is going to be liable for discrimination no matter how they bought it. So much of it too is, when the data sets that are out there, where they're using generative AI to make a job description, which is a very big use of it, or employment advertisement. Well, every line on there is federally protected. And if the Gen AI is just looking to say, well, if the vast majority of these engineering positions require X amount of years of coding, or the most successful applicants or companies that hire for a certain position have these buzzwords in there, and those buzzwords have the effect of dissuading women from applying. And there's a classic example, like we're looking for a rock star or a ninja coder, right?
Yeah.
If that's what the AI is finding, that this is what's getting people to apply and it's excluding women, again, you're going to be liable for that. And that's just looking at a discriminatory data set based upon another company's hiring practices, which you're going to impute in your own and you're going to be liable for based upon the vendor.
Right. So, Reva, I know that NIST is not a regulator, but NIST has big influence. How to make this the big provider to really adopt NIST framework for this?
How do they do that within the framework is that in the very first thing in the framework is that you actually have to follow the law and you have to know what the regulation is. So you have to make sure that the people, as part of your governance structure, that there are people in your organization who know what the laws are, not NIST, we don't make laws, but that the laws exist and that they have to follow them. And then from a third party standpoint, they have to apply all of the same risk controls that you would do for your own internal organization to all of the third-party material. So whether that's models, data, people, contracts, the code, et cetera. So that all applies.
And I think, all the examples I just gave you, having a framework like NIST framework, applying it to longstanding employment assessment laws and regulations that we have, allows you to test before it ever actually makes a decision in someone's livelihood, to test the models, to retest the models as you change what the job description is, as you change what the applicant pool is, to see if it's actually getting you the most qualified candidates or if it's discriminating against other groups. And prior to this, we didn't have that kind of access to the testing and data before. It's like, we're going to put a job advertisement up, we're going to get applicants, and we're hoping, we're not discriminating against them. We won't find out till later. But here, in real time, you can see if there's discrimination or not. Yes. And by testing the models and retesting it as the training data changes as well, all pre-deployment. And that's where a lot of state and foreign laws are going on the pre-deployment testing. But a lot of this is what I'm arguing, based on NIST standards, based on SR 11.7, using, again, the underlying EEOC employment laws as the basis, because you still need a basis laws, putting those in and working with the vendor on the front end before you even buy it, you can see if it's going to work or not. And in doing that and putting that extra time and effort in, you're preventing discrimination from happening, and you're preventing massive government investigations and class action lawsuits against your organizations. And that's all things you could be doing now under longstanding law, under some of the newer frameworks, and you don't have to wait for Congress or other governments to act. And that's really, I think, the point we're driving home. But it takes standards, and it takes an agency, whether it's us, in housing, the FTC, there's a lot of very old laws here in Washington, D.C., and you're giving a framework to use it. And because it's all out there and everything you're doing is free, you don't charge for it. A lot of the work you all did on SR 11.7, model risk management, completely free on the internet because I found it. It's going to be hard to the point where you're saying, well, we don't have resources. Yeah. We don't have tools. We don't know how to do this. It's impossible to do this when there's just already so much out there in the risk management space.
So I want to ask the last question here related to the executive order from the White House on this. What is any specific action from NIST and EEOC from that executive order?
I can go first. It's a lot of things that we have on our to-do list. First, we've been tasked with developing a companion resource for of the AI RMF, specifically for the risks of generative AI. We are providing guidance on, I'm going to forget something, but it's synthetic content, secure software, synthetic nucleic acid, and the risks that may arise from that. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something. And then we are also tasked with creating a new initiative for how to evaluate the risks of generative AI, specifically those that may cause severe harm, such as cybersecurity risk, bioweapons, biosecurity, and making sure that test beds are available for people to evaluate their, we talk about testing, where are the test beds? We are developing a global engagement strategy for international standards, and I think that's it. That's a lot.
It's not a fair question to NIST because it's like, it should be the NIST executive order. But from our perspective, what we're doing and what we continue to do is show how each one of our laws is impacted by AI. So we put out guidance under the Americans with Disabilities Act on how the ADA intersects with a lot of these AI tools that are using in hiring to make sure that candidates with disabilities have the same ability to perform the actual interview, largely based upon AI, whether it's natural language processing or video interviews, as somebody without a disability, that employers need to do the same accommodations they would for disabled workers and not using the tools, making sure the tools don't take any medical information from you that an interview wouldn't be allowed to ask anyway. We've also put guidance out on how employment assessment testing, which has been around since the Industrial Revolution, applies to these AI tests that are ranking candidates that are actually doing an employment assessment test now just through technology, and the candidate may not even be aware of it because it looks like a game on an app. Yes. So, a lot of that where we're saying, well, here's the parameters for using employment testing, and here's how it applies now that these tests are just not on a Scantron with a pencil and paper anymore, that it's like basically a video game, and here's how it's going to work. So we continue to say, here's our longstanding laws, here's how, the AI products that are out there, and here's what you can be doing to ensure that the rights aren't being violated of the candidates or the workers.
This is it's been very fascinating to me, and as you can see, the attention that we have, our regulator has, and NIST has on this. So I'm going to open it up to one or two questions from the audience. Or we don't have time on this one. Okay, all right. So thank you very much. I promise in my LinkedIn we're going to have lively conversation. We have it, right? Thank you so much. Thank you.